So my talk is about graphene and twisted by graphene. And it will be in two parts of different flavors. So in the first one, I will prove with full mathematical rigor a result which is already known in the physics community. While in the second part, I will address the issue of deriving good models for twisted barrier graphene, which is still a kind of open problem. Okay, so in the first part, so we'll just study a single layer of graphene, and the technique is to study the response to perturbation of a fermionic system with infinitely many particles. Okay, so we already had a very interesting talk by Stefan Teufel on this topic, but in Stefan's talks, it was about aperiodic lattice, so fermions on an aperiodic lattice. They were interacting, which was the most difficult part, but he made the assumption that there is a band gap. Okay, so here we'll consider a periodic continuous model of non-interacting particles, but in this case, I will not make any assumption on the band gap. Okay, so we start from this model. So we have a model for non-interacting electrons, or you can call it quasi-particles in a periodic crystal. So the Hamiltonian is of this form. So there is a magnetic potential and a vector potential and a scalar potential. This operator is self-adjoint on L2 of R3. And because I'm working in a periodic crystal, the potential A and V are have the periodicity of the lattice. So I did not by L the lattice. So for three-dimensional crystals, the lattice is a 3D lattice, while for graphene and other 2D materials, the lattice is a 2D lattice embedded in the three-dimensional space. Okay, and it's possible to compute approximations of A and V, for instance, from DFT. Now, if we turn on an external electromagnetic field, the Hamiltonian is modified as follows by introducing the external component of the magnetic potentials and the scalar potential. And in any case, at any time, the electronic state is described by a density matrix. So it's a self-adjoint operator on L2 of R3. So I don't put spin, but you can add spin, it's absolutely not a problem. And because of the Pauli principle, the spectrum of the density matrix gamma of T has to lay in the range 0, 1. Okay? And the dynamics of the electrons in this non-interacting model is governed by the quantum Liouville equation, which is given by this. So it's I as the derivative times the derivative of the density matrix is equal to the commutator of the Hamiltonian, which depends on time, and the density matrix at time t. Yes?
Are you making any assumptions on the external field?
For the moment, no. But then I will specify what I take for this study. Okay. So in the absence of external field, the system, the Hamiltonian is time independent, and we have seen many times that at 0 temperature, the electronic ground state is then a spectral projector, and is a spectral projector of the Hamiltonian on the range minus infinity mu f, where mu f is the Fermi level, and the Fermi level is characterized by the fact that the trace per unit volume, or in this case the trace per unit cell, is equal to the number of electrons that you expect per unit cell. Okay? And depending on the position of the Fermi level in the spectrum of H, so here it is the Fermi level is in a gap, and so we have an insulator or a semiconductor. And if the Fermi level is in the middle of bands, so for overlapping bands or not, then we have a metal. Okay. So we will start with the system in the ground state, and then we will turn on a uniform stationary electric field. Okay. So the Hamiltonian for times larger than t is given by this expression. So epsilon is the magnitude of the electric field, and E beta is the direction of the electric field. Oh, sorry. Oh. Okay. Yep. And, oops. Yeah. And in this case, the solution to the Liouville equation for positive time is just given by this formula. Okay. Since we have the density matrix at time t, we can compute the current, the mesoscopic current at time t is given by the trace per unit volume of the current operator multiplied by the density matrix at time t. Okay. And then from that, we can define a conductivity matrix. So to do that, we will, let me remind you that the current is equal to the conductivity matrix times the electric field. Okay, this is a vector, so this is a tensor. Okay, and I'm computing the components of this tensor. We have a question.
Yes. Just so the turn on is instantaneous?
Yes.
And is that a requirement or
no?
Just
well, it's, we did that, but it's not a requirement. You can turn it on in a more adiabatic way, and actually it's easier technically if you turn in adiabatically. If you turn on it adiabatically.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so then we define a kind of instantaneous conductivity by just deriving the current by the magnitude of the electric field. So we obtain a function, so this is a numerical simulation, we obtain a function which oscillates, okay? And we can consider the limit for long time, the long time limit of this ratio. Okay, and this defines the conductivity. Okay, so as we are a bit lazy, we instead of considering just the limit, we consider the limit in the Cesaro sense because technically it's easier. Okay, so you can see that there are two limits here, so it's a double limit, and you can interpret these two limits in this order. Okay, because if you reverse the order, it's completely different. This amounts to taking a very small perturbation, okay, and considering times between very large compared to 1 and very small compared to epsilon minus 1, okay? Okay, so basically we will study just this system of equations, okay, that's all. So the model is just there, this one.
Excuse me?
Yes?
So here, so why don't you use an electric potential rather than electric field? So does it require some assumptions on?
Well, this is the electric potential, okay?
Well,
this is the electric potential generated by this uniform electric field.
Okay, so
this is the electric field, okay, it's uniform. This is just a vector. And then the electric potential is epsilon times the coordinate. Okay, so it's as you see, it's a simple framework, but still it accounts for several interesting physical phenomena. Obviously we can differentiate metals and insulators, but we can also predict block oscillations, the quantum anomalous Hall effect, and this is the topic of this talk, the quantized DC conductivity of graphene. So just just to put this work in perspective, so there has been a lot of works on the microscopic origin of the electronic conductivity in the mass literature, but most of this work focus on either Anderson localization or the quantum Hall effect and the topological insulators. Okay. There has only been a few works on wave packet propagation with graphene-like Hamiltonians, in particular by Pfefferman and Weinstein and their collaborators. There's also a nice paper by Clotilde Fermanian and Florian Mehatz. But let me point out that wave packet propagation is very different from conductivity, okay? Because wave packet propagation consists in perturbating the vacuum, while conductivity consists in perturbating the Fermi sea. Okay. Okay, and so this work is about computing the conductivity for any system within this model, but with no assumptions on the gap, and the derivation of the quantized conductivity of graphene. Okay, so let me just recall introduce the modeling of perfect crystal and introduce some notation. So we denote by L the Bravais lattice, by omega the unit cell, by L star the reciprocal lattice, and by B the Brillouin zone. Okay, so this is a picture of the unit cell for FCC crystal, and this is a picture of the Brillouin zone. So this is in the position space, and this is in the momentum space. Okay, for graphene, and more generally 2D materials, the lattice is two-dimensional, and therefore the unit cell is a cylinder. Okay, and for graphene, so we have this honeycomb symmetry, and the Brillouin zone is an hexagon, and there are special points in this hexagon. So gamma is, as usual, the center of the Brillouin zone, so corresponding to k equals 0, and we have these special points k and k prime, which are asymmetry points, and which will play an important role in the model. Okay, so to construct the band diagram for a periodic system, so we have to consider the block decomposition. This is the block, the Hamiltonian for the wave vector k. Okay, and this is a self-adjoint operator on the space of periodic square integrable function on the unit cell. Okay, and this operator for 3D crystals has a compact resolvent, so it can be diagonalized in orthonormal basis. We denote by lambda 1k, lambda 2k its eigenvalues. Yes?
I want to point out that what you calculate is not the electric current, it's the electronic current.
Okay.
Because you're missing the displacement current. Maxwell equation.
Okay.
I don't know if it's important for here,
well,
since you have time-dependent fields.
For time dependent, but in this case, I'm considering in the end the DC conductivity. I don't think that this plays a role. Well, we should check that indeed the terms go to 0 in the limit. We haven't done that. I think they are, but yes, you're right. This should be right. Okay. Okay, and so then you can plot the band diagram. Okay, so this is the Brillouin zone. So the usual ways to plot band diagrams is to draw a path in this in the Brillouin zone and to plot these eigenvalues for along this path. Okay. So on this diagram, you have information on the propagation of wave packets, okay, basically for free, okay. In particular, so if you take a specific k point, and if you consider an initial data, so let's say a wave function phi naught of x, which is a block wave. A block wave for k equal k naught, and modulated by some function alpha naught of, let's say, epsilon x, and epsilon is very small, okay? Then the wave function at time t will be of the form alpha of epsilon x epsilon t times, so this is a function of x, and I k naught x, so there is probably a minus here, minus e and k naught t, okay? And the equation on alpha is simply a drift, so alpha at capital X and tau is simply alpha naught of x minus the group velocity, which is the gradient with respect to k of, so this is lambda, if I want to, okay, and this is the gradient with respect to k of lambda and k naught. Okay, so from this band diagram, okay, you can directly understand what will be the dynamics of the wave packet, okay? But for the conductivity, of course, it's different. Yes?
What Roy's question earlier, microscopically, do they differ by an inverse of a dielectric matrix or something? Roy, I think, had an earlier question, like the displacement.
For the displacement.
Yeah, do they differ by some sort of dielectric matrix?
I think it's a bit more complicated. Yeah, we can discuss that later. Yeah. Okay, so this is the kind of Venn diagrams you have from an insulator, a metal, or graphene. So in insulators, you have a gap here. So this is the Fermi level is about here. For metals, the Fermi level is somewhere here. Okay, so there is no gap. And for graphene, it's an interesting situation because the Fermi level it's exactly at the Dirac points here. And so in particular, so it's metallic in some sense because there is no gap, but the density of state, if you plot the density of state at the Fermi level, okay, something like that. So the density of state vanishes at the Fermi level. Okay. Yes. Kieron?
Well, I'm a little confused. Maybe I missed something at the start.
Yeah.
But are these electrons interacting
No.
or not?
No. So I specified that at the beginning. So they are not non-interacting in this framework.
But then, I mean, you know, if they're like, what about Hartree even?
Okay, so I will discuss R3 maybe in the second part of the talk, if you don't mind.
Okay, yeah, you'll resolve this.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. Thanks.
Thank you.
Okay, so for metals, yeah. So for metals, so we can classify materials depending on the. Another question?
Do you have another question? Yeah. Do you have another question?
No, I went to lower my hand and then somebody lowered it for me. So when I
Okay.
pressed on it, it raised my
fine.
hand.
Okay. So so we can classify materials depending on the shape of the Fermi surface, and actually not only on the shape of the Fermi surface, but the Fermi surface sheets. So what's that? So the Fermi surface is a set of k points for which there exists an eigenvalue lambda nk, for which lambda nk equals the Fermi level. Okay? And of course, you can split that, decompose that as a union of Sn, where Sn is the set of k points in the Brillouin zone for which lambda nk is equal to the Fermi level. Okay? So these are graphical representation of these Fermi surface sheets. You can see that their geometry is complicated, okay, and that the consequence of that in particular is that if you want to do numerics and integrate over in the Brillouin zone, okay, you can be, it's technically difficult. Okay, so our analysis will cover three types of these systems. So the first one is the case of topological insulators. I did topological because if the material is not is just a non-topological insulator, then the conductivity is zero, so it's not very interesting. So in topological insulators, the Fermi level is not in the spectrum of H, and as expected, we recover some well-known results, which has been widely studied in the mass literature. So I will just briefly recall them because, again, it's not the purpose of the talk. So what we obtain is that the conductivity matrix is antisymmetric and is given by the Kubo formula. The off-diagonal terms are integrals of the Berry curvature of the occupied bands. This off-diagonal term vanish when when the magnetic potential is zero because of the time reversal symmetry. And in 2D materials, the transverse conductivity is quantized and proportional to some Chern numbers. This is a famous TKNN formula. Okay, so the consequence of that is that if you take, for instance, a 2D topological insulator like that, you put an electric field in this direction, and the current will flow perpendicular to this electric field. Okay. Okay. So the second kind of system we'll consider are what we call non-degenerate metals. In non-degenerate metals, the Fermi surface is non-empty, but we assume that there are no crossing at the Fermi level. Okay. And that there are no locally flat band at the Fermi level. That is, that the gradient of the eigenvalues do not vanish at the Fermi level. And the third kind of system we can study are 2D semi-metals. So in this case, such as graphene. So in this case, we have a 2D lattice. We assume that the Hamiltonian satisfies the time reversal symmetry, and that the Fermi surface consists of a finite number of isolated Dirac points. So the theorem that we obtain is the following. So for 2D semi-metals, and on a mild assumption on the potential, then the conductivity is in fact quantized, and it is equal, so that the DC conductivity, it is quantized, and it is equal to the number of inequivalent Dirac points in the Brillouin zone divided by 16. And so for graphene, you have two non-equivalent points in the Brillouin zone, K and K prime, and so the conductivity matrix for graphene is 1/8 of identity. Yes?
About the requirement that there is no crossing at the Fermi level.
For metals, yeah.
So with the graphene situation,
No. That's item number 3. Graphene is this one, 2D semi-metal.
we don't require.
Yeah, no, because these are the 3 kinds of system. For non-degenerate metal, we make this assumption, but of course not for graphene. Yes, Salma?
It says they don't cover all the possibilities today.
No, maybe you could have. I don't know if it exists, but you could have a Fermi surface with, in particular, degenerate metals. I don't know if they exist in practice. Maybe yes, I don't know, but does not. Yeah, mathematically, it does not cover all the cases. Although, so we make simulations for on a bunch of crystals and of metals, and yeah, we did not observe degenerate metals, but yeah, maybe they exist. I don't know. Okay, so 2 remarks. So the first one is that the value of the conductivity is universal and does not depend on the characteristic of the Hamiltonian, only on the number of Dirac points. Okay, and the second remark is that our result is consistent with the formula, I think, first derived by Ludwig and collaborators in 1994, but it was obtained with starting from an effective Dirac Hamiltonian, okay, neglecting intervallic effect and assuming the Kubo formula. While here we prove the Kubo formula. Okay, so that's the. Okay, so very briefly some ideas on the proof. So the first thing is to, of course, do the block transform and use a change of gauge. So that's the change of gauge that Kiron mentioned some time ago. And okay, so this is the change of gauge. So just, okay, so first block transform. So in the block transform, yeah, okay, so that's just the block transform of the Hamiltonian, block transform of the density matrix. And just an observation that the block transform of the current operator is the derivative, minus the derivative of the Hamiltonian with respect to K. Okay, so then the change of gauge. So we start from the Liouville equation. We rewrite it in this way, and then the critical observation is that this commutator. So this commutator is an AC one because gamma is a periodic operator, but this function is not periodic. Okay, the operator consisting multiplying by the function x is not a periodic operator. Okay, but nevertheless, when you take the commutator of this function by a periodic operator, you still obtain a periodic operator, and the block transform of this operator is the gradient with respect to k of the block transform of this operator. Okay, and so these terms induces, so to say, a block transfer, a transport in the Brillouin zone. Okay. And then we make a change of gauge. We just once we identify that this is a transport, we do as usual. We follow the characteristics. Okay. And as usual for mathematicians, okay, it's very classical in fluid dynamics, for instance. You follow the characteristics, so it's a very natural gauge transform. Okay, and we end up with this kind of system. And then there are three relevant, important tools to prove this theorem. The first one is adiabatic theory. Okay, we already discussed adiabatic theory in Stefan Teufels's talk. So it has been widely studied in mathematics, but it is important to mention that adiabatic theory works away from crossings. Okay, adiabatic theory basically tells you that if you have a gapped eigenspace, so for instance here you are for this k point you have a gap. So let me consider the projection on all these eigenstates for a given k. Okay. And then you propagate in time using these Hamiltonians, okay? So you have a transport in K, and so you can see that if you start from here, the gap between this and this shrinks and eventually goes to 0, okay? And so we can apply adiabatic theory until the point we reach this area, okay? And in this area, it's not possible to apply adiabatic theory. Okay? And so what we do instead is that we use linear response theory. Okay? So in adiabatic theory, I consider that this Hamiltonian evolves slowly, and in linear response theory, I consider that epsilon t is small. Okay? So these are two different regimes. Okay? And if you combine these two regimes, and it's a bit tedious, the proof is a bit long, you obtain that everything goes well, and that in the end, the conductivity has this very nice expression. Okay? Yes?
So does this also hold for Dirac points that, let's say you have 2 or 3 inequivalent ones?
Yes.
Where the Dirac point is not at the same energy. Does it hold?
But if they are not at the same energy, you don't see them because it's you start from a density matrix. Okay, here. You propagate a density matrix, maybe it's, maybe here. You propagate a density matrix, okay? But this is this density matrix is the orthogonal projector, the spectral projector up to the Fermi level, okay? And if you have a crossing above, you don't see it. It's fine.
Excuse me, I also have, so this sigma quantized, right?
Yeah.
Is it a whole conductivity?
No, it's not. It's a longitudinal conductivity. Okay, so it's completely.
So there is no magnetic field for all.
There is no magnetic field. Okay, and the conductivity has a different origin. Okay, because we can discuss later. But yeah, so this is not the same kind of
Because there was
the quantification has not the same origin. One is a kind of a global topological. There is a topological reason in the first one. So here it's more a singularity. Okay, so you can interpret that as topological, but basically it's a singularity. While for topological insulators, it's a topological reason.
So this is what was called a few years ago the universal minimal conductivity of graphene, right?
Yeah.
Am I correct? So
probably.
Fermi level at 0.
Yes, okay. Exactly. Yeah. Okay, so just one quick remark about non-degenerate metals. So we have also it's also an interesting case. So I state the theorem in the case where there is just one conducting band. So we have a result for multiple conducting bands, but we have stronger results if there is just one conducting band. So let me formulate them. So in this case, we have 4 different regimes. So for small times, you just see quantum fluctuations, so noise basically, okay? if the time is very large compared to 1 and very small compared to 1 over epsilon, we just have ballistic transport, okay, as in the homogeneous electron gas, okay, you just have a transport of, ballistic transport of the electrons, okay. And the interesting regime is this one. If T is very large compared to 1 over epsilon and very small compared to minus log epsilon over epsilon, you have Bloch oscillations, okay? And what are the Bloch oscillations? You can check on this formula that basically if epsilon B, so the direction of the electric field, is commensurate with the reciprocal lattice, then this function is periodic. And so you have a current which is periodic in time. So it's a bit counterintuitive because you put a uniform electric field in the uniform electron gas. What you will have is that the Fermi level will drift, okay, and basically that the electrons will be accelerated uniformly, and you have a current which grows in time linearly with time. Okay, it's what you have for the uniform electron gas. Here, because of these Bloch oscillations, what you have is that the current does that, okay? So the electrons, so to say, do that. And so Bloch oscillations, so some remarks on this result. So of course, this result is about coherent transport, okay? So we did not take into account the sources, the various sources of dissipation, such as the interaction between electrons and phonons, the impurities, electron interactions, okay? And for reed metals, you have a finite conductivity because of this dissipation effects, okay? And in particular, in the Drude approximation, you assume that there is an effective time scale, okay, which is larger than the coherence time scale of the electrons, but smaller than the Bloch oscillation time scale, and which yields a finite DC conductivity. Okay. In usual metal at room temperature, so dissipation is dominated by phonons, okay, by phonon scattering, and so the relaxation time tau is of the order of tenths of femtoseconds. So you don't see really Bloch oscillation in real metals. On the other hand, you can observe Bloch oscillations in, for instance, semiconductor superlattices, okay? Because then the relaxation time is much smaller and you can actually see experimentally Bloch oscillations. Okay, so I'm at the end of the first part. Is there any question? No? Okay, so let me proceed. Yes? Alfred?
You said that for longer times you had some results which are
inconclusive. Yeah.
Inconclusive. But
yeah. Yeah, because there is transfer to the because here so this result is based on adiabatic theory, okay, and adiabatic theory is for not for infinitely long times, okay. At some point you have transfer to the of information from these bands to the upper bands, and you lose information. Okay, so the second part is about twisted bilayer graphene. Okay, so we take two graphene layers, and we put one. They are parallel. We put one in this plane and the other one in this plane, and we twist them. We twist one of them by an angle theta. Okay. And so this kind of system is of big interest for in condensed matter physics, in particular because it was observed experimentally that they were unconventional superconducting phases in the phase diagram of twisted bilayer graphene. Okay, that's a very famous experiment. Done a few years ago, and this was observed for a so-called magic angle, okay, which is theta about 1 degree, okay, and 1 degree is small, okay, so you have the twist angle is very small, and so the moire pattern that you see here, so this is a picture for an angle not so small, okay, so you can see clearly a moire pattern here. Okay, but for small twist angles, the size of the moire pattern is quite large. Okay, and in particular for this kind of angle, so you have a moire cell containing more than 10,000 atoms. So it's a big moire cell. Okay, and because this number is large, most theoretical and numerical studies were performed with the Bistritzer-McDonald model, which was introduced 10 years ago. And so this model is a PDE on L2 of R2 with value in C4, so it's a bit like in the Dirac model Maria told us about. Okay, it's purely empirical, and it depends on two real parameters, W0 and W1. And so this model was used in particular in these studies where so these people were able to prove the existence of magic angles where there exists a flat band at the Fermi level. Okay. Okay. So the question is it possible to derive a kind of Bistritzer-McDonald model, okay, from DFT? Okay. So this had been done recently by in the group of Tim Kaxiras. And their approach was to start from DFT calculations, parameterize a tie-binding model using Wannier functions, and then from this tie-binding model, derive a continuous model at the Moiré scale. Okay? And here we would like to see if it's possible to go directly from DFT calculation to this continuous model at the Moiré scale and bypass the tie-binding approximation. Okay, so the first question is, do we have a Concham model for twisted Bayer graphene? Okay. So first, we can see that if theta, if the twist angle theta satisfies this relation where n and r are co-prime integers, then the system is periodic. Okay, and as soon as you have a periodic system, the Concham model or within the LDA or GDA approximation is well defined. Okay, and we can define mathematically a Concham model for a periodic system, at least within, say, LDA approximation. But now, if theta is not of this form, and there is only a countable number of special angles like that, okay, in the general case, the system is not periodic. Okay, and for a periodic system, it's not obvious at all to define mathematically a Concham model. We tried that with Salma in the room and Mathieu Levin for disordered crystals. So in this work, we are able to prove that there exists a ground state for a kind of Concham ground state for disordered crystals, okay? But we are not able to prove enough properties on the electrostatic potential generated by the Concham ground state density to define mathematically a Concham Hamiltonian. Okay. So the point is that so you find a ground state density matrix by minimizing some problem. Okay, so we know how to do that. From that, we have a ground state density. Okay, but if you want to define a Concham potential, you have to solve the Poisson equation. Okay, and this step is very difficult if you don't have a periodic function or a function which decays at infinity, and prove sufficiently many properties on V to then define Hamiltonian of, so this is R3, and then plus, blah, blah, blah. Okay, so that's the difficult part. Solve this equation and prove and establish some properties on this equation to then have a self-adjoint operator here. Okay. Okay, well, so that was just a remark. So as it is difficult to construct a Concham potential for this system, we will use an approximation of this Concham potential. So the first idea is to use just the sum, because, okay, in twisted Bayer graphene, the layers are weakly interacting, so to say. Okay, it's not covalent bonds, it's van der Waals interaction, and so you can say, okay, maybe if we just sum the quantum potentials of each layer by just shifting and twisting this potential, maybe it will be enough. Okay, so we tried that in this paper. George Tsitsadis was a PhD or postdoc of Tim Caxias. And it was a paper also with Mitch Luskin and Paul Cazot and so on. And we realized that, in fact, if we just sum the quantum potential is not good, but this approximation can be much improved by adding a potential which depends only on the z variable and which can be computed by just doing simulation on periodic systems. Okay, so we tried that; it works not bad. And so in this work, I will consider this potential. Okay, and this potential actually has very nice properties. So this is the operator we just translate along Z and rotate the function. Okay, and it involves the rotation matrix. And you can rewrite this rotation matrix, of course, as usual. And for small twist angle, so this is a parameter close to 1, and this is the small parameters. Here you have the J matrix, the symplectic matrix. And if you just rewrite this potential using this formula, you obtain that it is in fact a two-scale potential. So there is very naturally the appearance of a two-scale potential. And this function V, so it depends on two copies of the longitudinal variables and the transverse variables. And this function Vd has the atomic scale periodicity, okay, with respect to this little x variable, and the JL periodicity, so that is the Moiré periodicity, with respect to this macroscopic or mesoscopic variable. Okay, and so the approximation of the time of the quantum Hamiltonian for twisted Bayer graphene is this one. And here, as mathematicians, we are happy because we have a two-scale Hamiltonian, and there are a lot of techniques like homogenization, semi-classical analysis to deal with this kind of Hamiltonians. Okay. Okay. So just one remark: if you so this is the mesoscopic variable. So if you freeze the value of the mesoscopic variable, you obtain a Hamiltonian which describes an untwisted bilayer graphene with a discrete GS3. Okay, and so you should see this Hamiltonian. So you have you have the microscopic or the atomic scale cell of the graphene, and then you have a Moiré scale, which is much larger, and so the unit cell is just rotated. So. And if you look locally, what's going on here, for instance, if you zoom, you see almost, well, two sheets of graphene which are almost periodic, okay, because if the twist angle is very small, locally you just see parallel sheets, okay. But here there is a discrete GS3 between the two layers, okay. So here, for instance, you have AA stacking, okay. But otherwise, here, for instance, you have another kind of stacking, okay? And you can, the stacking is just given by this formula, okay? Okay, so now, so let me get back to the electronic structure of graphene. I should hurry up, I'm a bit late. Okay, so for the graphene monolayers, we have so we focus on one Dirac point, and these are the block waves at this Dirac point, at K point, And so there has been a result by Pfefferman and Weinstein about wave packet propagation in this material, in graphene, and the equation that they derive can be recovered very formally. Okay, this is a rigorous mathematical derivation, but you can recover the equation very easily by projecting this equation on a variational approximation space consisting on so these are the block waves at the K point capital K, and these are envelope functions at the Moiré sail. Okay, and if you do that, you recover the Dirac equation for graphene. Okay, so here for the TBG we do the same, except that instead of considering wave packets which are obtained by just the superposition of the two block waves of the graphene, we consider a wave packet expanded on the four functions correspond to the K point of the two layers and twisted. Okay. So we expand in this basis. So these are the envelope functions, and then we have using the variational approximation, we obtain an effective equation on these four envelope functions. Okay, and we put that in a vector, and we obtain a kind of we obtain an effective model on the envelope. Okay. And in this way, so we obtain a PDE set on the same space as the Bitstreether-McDonald model. And if you compare this model with the Bitstreether-McDonald model, you can see that some terms are the same. In blue, that the terms which are the same. And then, so here we have, this is the overlap matrix. We have off-diagonal terms because there is a small overlap between the block functions of the two layers. The nice thing is that we have explicit and computable off-diagonal terms. So there is no empirical model. It comes from Concham, and there are off-diagonal terms as well. So the mathematical justification and the mathematical and numerical comparison with other methods is work in progress. Hopefully, I will present that in the Moiré material mini workshop in 3 or 4 weeks. Okay, so just briefly some conclusions. This is, as far as I know, the first attempt to derive an effective model for Moiré materials directly from Concham Hamiltonians and bypass tight binding models. So we use instead tools from homogenization and semi-classical analysis. The extensions is a work in progress, funded by the Simon Foundation Target Grant on Moiré Materials Magic. It's easy to include, I did not mention relaxation. So we see in Mitch Luskin talks, relaxation is very important, but it's very easy to include relaxation in this model if the displacement field is given. We can also add electromagnetic field and so on. I will conclude just in 2 minutes by saying that we are also planning to develop a package for Moiré material simulation within DFTK, and so it's time to advertise the DFTK. So DFTK is a density functional toolkit. It's a plane wave DFT package in Julia, which is valuable for the community. It's an outcome of the ERC Synergy project we have with Laura Grigori, Yvon Madé, and Jean-Philippe Picmal. So my main contribution to the development of DFTK was to raise the money. The people who actually developed the code are Antoine Levint and our former outstanding postdoc Michael Herbst. And so the nice thing with this code is that it has a low entrance barrier compared to, I don't know, Quantum Espresso or Rabinit, because it's very small. Of course, it has much less functionalities, but it is a small code, 7,000 lines, and it scales up to relevant application with 1,000 electrons, and it's fully composable with Julia ecosystem. You can do, for instance, algorithmic differentiation. It was mentioned by one of you, and do numerical error control. So we used it for in several applications. For instance, Michael and Antoine introduce a new way for doing a black box preconditioning in DFT. And in this work, we derive a posteriori error estimates and rigorous ones for non-self-consistent Concham equations. So this is a Venn diagram with error bars. And these error bars account for a plane wave discretization error, a finite convergence threshold, and floating point arithmetics. So this is for one set of parameters, and this is for another set of parameters and also another model. And these error bars here, they are really fully guaranteed. So for a given model, of course, okay? But once you choose a model, then we can sign the blueprint, okay? We're sure that the result lays in this confidence interval. It's not a statistical confidence interval. Okay, and last slide. I would like to advertise the summer school on DFTK that we are organizing with Michael and Antoine. So it's centered around DFTK in its multidisciplinary philosophy. Okay? And so we will review the basics of electronic structural theory, the mathematical background, the numerical methods, and the implementation. And also do some applications, and there will be hands-on sessions, of course. The deadline for application is approaching soon, and it's still possible to apply for funding, thanks to our sponsors. Okay, so thank you for your attention.